I'm very pleased to welcome Ryan Wilson, known as ThankYouX. And I want to just share a little bit about him as we get into some questions. ThankYouX pushes the boundaries of his practice with artworks that utilize both traditional and digital mediums, mixing works on canvas, physical, digital hybrids that utilize embedded screens and entirely digital compositions. As a painter living in Los Angeles, he started out as an anonymous street artist, and over the last 15 years, his work evolved through experimentation with geometric forms and layered abstraction to a point where his art is now internationally recognized. So I want to get to...
it sounds so much better when you say it.
And I only read half of it, but I want to get to the questions because I'm sure people will want to hear from you. So I'll start off with just the beginning of your career, Ryan. ThankYouX, which began in the streets of LA with tributes to Andy Warhol in 2009. What inspired you to take that bold step, and how did you develop your identity as ThankYouX?
Well, first off, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. This is my first time at the Rivian Theater, but I remember back when it was like a real old theater, so cool to be here. So listening to Josh talk, actually, we have a lot of similarities where we kind of worked several jobs before we kind of took off into our own direction. So I related a lot with what he said, but back then, I used to do like graffiti stuff. My dad's here, so I don't want to tell him too much, but when I was younger, I did a lot of random graffiti stuff, and didn't have like a direction. I just liked that stuff. And I was inspired by people I saw on like message boards in New York and stuff like that. And at the time I was working as an art director at a music merchandising company called Bravado, which is owned by Universal Music Group. And very amazing job doing all these really cool creative things. But I was kind of giving it all to other people. And I needed to do something for myself again. So after work, I'd go home and I'd just start painting, creating stencils and making wheat paste posters and all these different things. And one thing I kind of came across was like my love for Warhol, which like obviously it's such low-hanging fruit. Everyone loves Warhol. These are some old images. But basically, no one's kind of came out and just said thank you to Warhol. And so I wanted to just like make this like tribute series to him. And I just wrote thank you, and I just signed it with an anonymous X. And then I just put it all over LA for like months and months, every single night at 2 a.m. And one day at work, one of the like inspiration blogs that I was looking at posted my work. And I was just like shocked. I didn't know what to do. And it called me ThankYouX because it reads like ThankYouX. They didn't know what my name was, and I didn't have a name. And so, I basically, the reason I chose the image of Warhol though was he took a lot of famous people's images and just repurposed them, and he kind of owned them. So like when you think of Marilyn Monroe, you always think of the Warhol as well, you know? And he did it with so many just different celebrities. And I thought like, well, what if I did that with him? And so kind of like showing him the mirror, you know? And I think that he would kind of maybe appreciate it as well because he loved attention and stuff like that. So that's how I kind of started doing ThankYouX. And it was never planned to be anything. It was just kind of an outlet for me. And kind of caught on.
Amazing. It took a life of its own. So while doing all this, you worked, as you pointed out, full-time for Universal Music Group's music merchandise company during the day, and working with your major brands and musicians. How did you balance full-time work with your art projects shape your artistic evolution?
Well, it's interesting because I took a lot of time to like create the work I was doing at work, like for other people. And you see little bits and pieces of my own kind of art in there, but it was never fully mine. And so I would that's what really like lit a fire under me to be like, I need to do my own thing. So I had this like energy to, force me down that route. But at the time, honestly, like a lot of Red Bull and a lot of coffee. I was working from 9 till like 7, depending on like what the tour schedule was of like Katy Perry or something. And then I would have to like, or I didn't have to, then I'd go home and I'd prep all this stuff in my room. And then I'd go out at 2 a.m. because that's basically at 2 a.m. in LA is when like the police force becomes less. So like there's less police patrolling right after the bars let out. It kind of gets a little quieter there. So that's when I would go out and just start putting stuff everywhere. And show up to work the next day at 9 a.m. and have, 3 coffees and 2 Red Bulls. And I don't recommend that. That's not a healthy route, but it's just kind of what I had to do. But yeah.
Some advice for our students, although I think they follow some of those.
I feel like now, this was like 2009. There's probably some healthier alternatives now. Some green juice, teas maybe, but
still lots of sugary drinks, I think.
But I think to be honest with you, once I got that that attention from that blog that I respected, that was more fuel than the coffee or the Red Bull. To be honest with you, I was like, oh, okay, like I'm onto something, and I just was like, oh, people like this, and there were like comments under it being like, oh, this is cool, or oh, this sucks. But it made me want to go out every night, and so then I started meeting up with other artists. Like at that time, this was like I don't know, have you guys seen like Exit to the Gift Shop? The Banksy. So like this was before that. So like the big wave hadn't come yet. So all the LA street artists kind of knew of each other, and then they would meet in the streets on accident, like 2 a.m. And it's funny because like the people that took me under their wing early on cross over into Josh's story with Seventh Letter crew. So Seventh Letter, to go in deeper, was this, LA's biggest graffiti crew, which became like, they also ran Known Gallery and Seventh Letter Gallery. And they were just like a huge inspiration for me. So like those were people like, I don't know, who kind of saw what I was doing and took me under their wing a little bit.
Fantastic to have that support. So your journey from physical street art to blending abstract painting with the digital world is quite unique. What was the catalyst to inspire your shift into Web3 and digital art?
Well, I mean, there's a big gap in between there. So it's not just like, it was like one night I was like, oh, you know what? I should put screens into my paintings and try to blend digital with physical. It was like, my background was like graphic design, art direction. And then over the years, I started doing creative direction for touring musicians as well. And like, it's kind of similar to what you're saying. Like you went viral. Like I was pretty popular online and in like a niche world for doing my street art. And, but at the same time, I was like trying to do side gigs and things like that to survive and pay rent. So I would do things like creative direction for touring apps. So there's this act called Louis the Child, which is like a DJ group that asked me to be their creative director for a while. And I would design like their stage setup, their tour visuals, and oversee, like if I wasn't making them, I was hiring other people to like oversee this whole vision. And so, but I'd never, again, it kind of went back to the old days of when I was doing something for someone else. I was building their brand. So I thought about it one day and I was like, well, what if I try to do this for my own stuff? Like blend what I was doing with the paintings and, like the murals and stuff like that. And then, but now I can like break another barrier by adding digital elements to it.
So during this time, you were starting to show your works around the world. But the big moment in your career was the groundbreaking collaboration with the composer Hans Zimmer for Phillips Auction House. What was the process behind merging his music with your visual art for Sound of Color?
Yeah, so at the time in 2021, I was getting reached out to by a lot of musicians that wanted to collaborate with me on a project. And there's Hans Zimmer. And every one of the musicians, I was like, respected their work, liked their work, but it didn't feel right with my work. So maybe I listened to their music in the car. And then my agent at the time was like, hey, you're getting a lot of like requests to do music stuff. And I stopped working with like creative direction stuff. I was just doing my own stuff at this time. She's like, would you want to do anyone, or should I just tell everyone no? And I was like, the only person I really would want to work with is Hans Zimmer. And there's no way he's ever going to want to collaborate with me. So, let's just say no. And she's like, oh, I never thought of that. That's interesting. You're going totally different direction. And basically his music is just timeless. And I wanted my art to be timeless now. Like I'd moved away from the street art. I'd gotten to galleries. I'd done, gallery shows, like group shows, solo shows all over the world at this point. Some successful, some not so successful, but I still did it. And I was at this point where I was like, I can say no to stuff. I was doing better. And then at this point, I was doing like very abstract work with hybrid, like digital mediums as well. And I felt like what I was attempting to do was to make timeless art. And Hans was the person that like I painted to. Like I listened to his music. And honestly, a lot of creatives, whether they're, gamers or making digital art or painting anything, like a lot of people listen to Hans's music because it's this journey that becomes your own soundtrack. Like remove the movie and now he's making this just for you. Like when you listen to this. So anyways, a week later I had a meeting with Hans Zimmer, and she reached out to someone that she knew on his team, and they liked my work, and we did a meeting, and then we agreed to do a collaboration. And that was like the coolest thing I've ever done and probably will ever do, because he's someone that I just like respect a lot. And yeah, at the time we pitched the concept first to the 3 major auction houses, Phillips, Christie's, and Sotheby's. And timing wise worked better with Phillips. And so we went with them, and it was great. It was July 2021. And he made a custom score. He actually told me a story about, I'll make this quick, but he told me a story about how Interstellar, the movie, started and how like it came to be. And he said that he was at an event with Christopher Nolan. And Christopher Nolan pulled him aside and he's like, "Hey, I knew I was going to see you tonight. Can you do me a favor? Read this piece of paper. And if anything comes to mind, like send me like a little thing tonight, if this inspires you at all." And it was a story about, it was like a very brief story about a father and son relationship, about like this tension and blah, blah, blah. And Hans goes back to the studio after the thing and like calls him and he's like, "Hey, I have something. I'll play it over the phone or I'll send it to you." He's like, "I'm coming to the studio." Goes to the studio and he just plays the piano line from Interstellar. He's like, "I don't know, this is kind of what I came up with." And he's just like, "All right, I guess I have to write a movie now." And so the reason I say that is because he goes, "You have to start this one. You play me the piano line and then I'll go from there." And so it was this game where he's like, feed me the inspiration and then I go, and there's this work of back and forth. So I kind of came up with this concept of like, so I learned a lot about his story, and it had a lot to do with my story too, like coming from this underground, not being accepted and blah, blah, blah. He like fell into composing. He was trying to be like a rock star, basically. We created this kind of concept of like artists underground making their own thing happen, becoming very big underground, and then to where like the mainstream or above ground can't deny you anymore and can't not look away. So I came up with that concept, wrote a little brief. I'm very bad at writing. So like I wrote a sloppy version of that. ChatGPT wasn't around yet, so I couldn't cheat. And then sent him like a still, like a video still. And he was like, "Okay, I can go from this." And so like he wrote a piece and he did a score. We made 3 pieces together. He came to my studio and like recorded like me painting. And like, so the painting behind is one of the pieces. We did 2 digital pieces, and then this physical piece, you can't see it, but he's hiding the screen that's built into the canvas. And when you hear the audio, there's spray paint cans, like it's not like faking it. Like we're really painting that painting, and brush strokes, and he used it in the audio. So in the final version of the audio, it says like Hans Zimmer featuring ThankYouX, Sound of Color. So that was like the coolest thing I've ever done. And yeah.
Yeah, definitely the passion with, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, the passion that you speak about, that collaboration, is always this very symbiotic collaboration that works and so well together. Great example.
It was also like a weird time for art because like it was during the pandemic. It was 2021, so it was like some things had opened up, and then we kind of went too crazy, and then things closed again. And so like I went to New York, and it was my first time traveling. And it was kind of like crazy to be like, I can't believe I'm in New York right now. Like, and we had an opening, and it was like a very intimate opening at Phillips. And and it was a crazy cool auction and very successful. And doing that elevated me to just a different level where many more different eyeballs were on me that wouldn't have been before. Especially if I would have tried to do this same project with like a DJ or a rapper that wanted to work with me, you know?
So in 2021, you curated the Contemporary Art Day auction at Sotheby's alongside contemporary works by Hearst, Banksy, and Warhol. How did you feel to have your digital art recognized along such iconic names?
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. That was my first time working with Sotheby's. And again, that goes back to the Hans thing, because it all started where all of those auction houses had started hearing about me. And then that was our first time like talking to them, was the Hans Zimmer when we pitched it. And so Sotheby's wanted to do the Hans Zimmer project, but they wanted to do it like 6 months later or like 7 months later, and was like, we need to do this in like 3 months, because Hans Zimmer was making the Lion King 2 soundtrack, and he's like, I only have this window. But we said, hey, we're going to go with Phillips with this one, but let's actually fill that time slot. Or when you gave us, they were like, can you do a solo show? I was like, I'm not ready for that, but I'll put a piece in because they wanted me to put a piece in their day auction. And I was like, I'll put a piece in. And they're like, what about curation? Because I was like very in touch with a lot of artists. And we did this project, like this section of the collection that was called a modern diptych. And it was like a digital piece and a physical piece. So artists that were kind of working in both mediums, but showing it as a physical, like whether it's a print or a painting or, the hybrid between. And it was incredible. It was in London. It was like a very big sale. It was part of the sale where they sold the shredded Banksy. So like all the big names were like in the bigger room, if I'm being honest. And I was like in the side room, but we were still there. And I think that was like a very big moment for me, being like, I can't believe I'm looking at a Hearst and a Warhol. And like, anytime I see a Warhol in like my work in the same area, I'm like, it all started there, So it's a lot of like full circle moments for me. Yeah.
So like Josh, who spoke earlier, you had unique opportunities to create artistic partnerships with the likes of the Grammys and Snapchat. How did these come about, especially since you have a unique story about Snapchat? Could you share that?
Yeah. So I do want to say my friend Casey's here, and he's actually the first person to ever believe in me enough to like pitch me for a brand. So he works for an agency, and at the time they were looking for like a street artist to do like a mural at their Sundance Film Festival for Microsoft. And he put my name in, and they were like, oh, we've seen this guy's work all over LA. Cause I just like went relentlessly and put it out. This is again, like we're bouncing around like Pulp Fiction here, but yeah, so that was like my first time ever doing a brand partnership. When Snapchat came around, it was right after Steve Jobs died, and I painted a portrait of Steve Jobs, and I gave it to my friend Amy Powell, who at the time was the head of television at Paramount. Amy had hired me as a street artist to be a consultant for a bunch of their marketing campaign projects, just to get a different person in the room. She had seen my stuff. We had a connection, and she was like, I want like someone that's thinking differently to come in. And so I knew she was a big fan of Steve Jobs as I was. So I painted this portrait and I gave it to her as a gift. And again, like Josh said, this was pre-Instagram. So I had like a Facebook, and that I took a picture of the painting of Steve Jobs, and that went viral on Facebook because it was like, a tribute to him, much like I did to Warhol. But this was like a person who had just passed away and like had a big impact on my life. And everyone kept trying to get me to sell prints of it and commission it. And I was like, I'm like, I made this for her, and I'm not, trying to capitalize on someone's death. And that's weird. So, one day I get a cold email in 2013 from a company called Snapchat. And I was like, I've heard of this app. It was like not really popular. And, they're like, hey, can you come meet with us? Like, we like your art. And I was like, okay. And I worked with brands at this point, but it was like I work with like an agency that works with like the marketing guy, that works with like the events guy. And I'd never talked to like the CEO before. And so I went and I met with the CEO of Snapchat at their, like the house they were working out of. And they go, we liked your work. We saw this piece of Steve Jobs. We really love this. You know, just we started talking, got along with him. And at the end of the meeting, the guy that works for him pulls me aside. He's like, okay, cool. So we want to buy a Steve Jobs painting. And I was like, oh, like I'm not selling them. He was like, oh, just tell us like how much it costs. And, you know, like, well, and I was kind of like, all right. And I'm living in like a small apartment in LA. I quit my job at this point and just gone all in on art, which I don't recommend unless you like can really, really do it. Hang on to the corporate job as long as you can, but capitalize the corporate job to help benefit. Just like we have a lot of similarities of like our stories. So, so I thought about it and I was like, all right, I'll get back to you. And on the way home, I like talked to my friend and he was like, yeah, you can't sell it. And I was like, but like I could ask for like $10,000 and you know, whatever. And that would like change my life. And he's like, you got to just give it to him. He's like, did you like him? And I was like, yeah, he's really cool. And I was like, you should give it to him. And I was like, all right, you're right. So I hit the guy up. I was like, hey, I'm going to, you know, give it to you or give Evan one. And so he's like, oh, great. We'll surprise him. That'll be a really great thing. I can't believe you're doing that. Because at this time, I think like everyone in the tech industry was like trying to like take from him and whatever. And they were asking me for something. So I gave it to him. He was very happy. And then we just developed a friendship over the next 6 months or so. And then one day he called me. He's like, hey, we just got real offices. Do you want to come be the artist to come paint the offices? And I was like, yes, I do. I would love to do that. And that changed my life in like many ways because, again, at that time, like there was no more hyped like tech company than Snapchat. Like everybody wanted them. Like media, they couldn't get an interview. It was like the craziest thing. And then, like Bloomberg wrote an article saying like, my art was in like the lobby because they couldn't get past the lobby. They just saw like one of my pieces in the lobby. And then, tons of like tech collectors and people started like reaching out to me like, oh, like I was kind of like by proxy, like they wanted to be associated with me because they see that Snapchat wants to be part of me. So there was just like this whole weird thing. But yeah, Evan came to my studio and he was like, I don't want to just buy one of your pieces. I love your art, but I don't want to just buy your pieces for the office. We have to make this collaboration. And so we did a whole thing where we kind of like created this series together and it lived on. I think it started with 4 pieces and then he'd call me a couple months later and be like, oh, we just bought the building next door. Can you come and do 4 more? I'm like, all right, cool. And then, hey, we just got another building, 4 more. And so I think we did like 12 or 16 pieces total. And they were like, hey, we got more. And I was like, dude, we can't keep doing the same thing. So I was like, we either have to like reinvent what we're doing here or we can't keep doing this. Like financially it was cool. But at the same time, I'm like, this is leading down a path where like, they're going to start to suck or it's going to start to get old. And so, but one of the reasons it changed my life, obviously I got a lot of attention from the tech world, which I paid a lot of attention to myself anyways, was as he's leaving my studio one day, he goes, oh, by the way, like, if you want, like, you should try and take some of it in equity. And I was like, okay, like, I didn't know that was an option. And so basically, like, it was the equivalent of 2 paintings. They gave me half in equity. So the first one, it was 4 paintings. They gave me 2 in equity. I've never said this before, but like at the time it would have been like, I think they were paying like $3,000 per painting at the time. And so $6,000 worth of equity, which ended up being like a lot of money later on. More money than I'd ever seen before. It wasn't like, but the only reason I knew to do that is because David Cho did it with Facebook. And I didn't get anywhere near that kind of thing. Like he was already a millionaire when he did that. But just knowing that was a possibility, like changed my life because I really needed that $6,000. Like I really could have used that money in my life in rent, but I was like, okay, can I live off like rice and ramen and like, get by? And that's what I did. And then I sat on that because that was 2013. And then, they didn't go public till like 2017 or 18 or something like that. So those years I was just like, okay, well, I do have that Snapchat stock. So it's like, I had that and I didn't know if it was like what was going to happen with it, but I took that risk and I think it was a great risk and it paid off. That was like the most special like brand partnership that I've done that impacted my life in a big way. And it was all like kind of a bunch of key things lining up to make that happen. Me working with someone because they liked my street art and they liked me thinking differently. Me then giving her a painting for her office. Someone randomly seeing it in her office. That so it was kind of just like this chain link of things that led to me ending up there. Yeah.
So this question sort of relates a little bit to the experience you just shared, and it's important for our student artists, is how important is it for artists to understand the business side of art today? And any advice you can give our students for how they can engage with and have their voices heard and seen in the public eye. And I think your last example that you just gave covers that, but if there's anything else you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, at first I used to not think that mattered because I was just like, oh, it takes away from the art, this and that. But I think after you get burned a bunch of times, you sign the wrong contract, you don't know what's going on. Like I did this one project, I probably have an NDA, but I don't really care. I did I just won't say the brand's name, but I did a project and I unknowingly signed something and someone claimed that I used a piece of their work in the work that I did for this brand that was at their like showroom. And it wasn't. Like I took the picture, I uploaded it, but because I signed this contract, it said that they have say, the brand has say of like of how I have to handle it. And all the financial elements are on me. So it was like, I was basically being threatened to be sued for $15,000. And I was like, that's a lot of money right now. I can't do that. And I was like, I had a guy who was going to work for me for free. I showed him all the evidence. He's like, oh yeah, okay, we got this. But then the brand was like, just make it go away, just settle. And I was like, but it's not. And they're like, we don't care. And I'm like, okay. And this is like someone who's just like an IP shark that just tries to like go for people. And they just like try to sue everybody. And then like 3 people will end up paying him. So basically like that moment, I was like, all right, I need to be smarter about what I'm signing, who I'm working with, like how I document these things to prove what I'm doing. And yeah, so that was a big thing. And honestly, going back to my friend Casey here. So like the first brand partnership I ever did was with Microsoft at Sundance Film Festival. The first year I got hired, I think I got $3,500 for like the week or something like that. And that was like insane. I was working at Universal Music Group at the time. I took my vacation to, oh no, we're running out of time. So I'll make this quick. I took my vacation to go to Park City to work for a week, painting and doing all this stuff. At the end of it, the Microsoft executives were cutting the drywall out and shipping it back to Microsoft for their offices. And I was like, oh wait, like, should I get more money? And then they're like, yeah, that's just part of the deal. And I'm like, all right. But I wasn't mad. I was just kind of like, oh, okay. And then the next year, so that year I got hired in like December. Sundance is in January. The next year, it got such a good reaction because like a lot of the like, people that showed up for the event like loved the art, and there was like celebrities that liked the art. And so they hired me like, I think in like September. So it was like way earlier. They're planning ahead. They're like, we want you to come back and do it. And I was like, all right, I have a few requests. This time, like you guys get first right of refusal to the art. Anything I make on the property is a rental, so like I own everything. If you want it, you have it. And then that year I made like 4 times as much money because they still bought the art and that. So like learning things as you go because you have, fail or a hiccup or something like that, but then kind of using that being like, oh, okay, good to know for next time, good to know for next time. And going back to the like taking 10 years before you kind of have that moment. It's all of those little tiny things that help you along the way. Like I'm so glad that the first year I still made money, but then, next year I learned how it worked, and I'm so glad that person reached out and wanted to like try to say I stole from them because now I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I document everything. I actually post a lot of the pre-stuff as I'm making it so that you can see the story along the way. And I have a lawyer look at it. So that's the big part for me.
Having the lawyer look at it is rather crucial as well. But
also, I would like to say I don't pay my lawyer. So I trade my lawyer for art.
There you go.
And if you're an artist, the best thing you can do in life is trade art, or honestly give art away to people. Like, you never know what's going to happen to that. If someone that you know, like, has a cool clothing store or a cool office where cool people come, it should be like an honor if you're starting out to like have your art in their office and have like someone want your art in their office. So like that was always my mentality, was give the art away at first, because I had a job at the time. And so, but all of the times of giving away art led to something, I feel like, later on down the road.
Well, we are out of time, but I just want to, if we can take 2 more minutes, I want to ask you this last question, because it's connected to what we just talked about, which is, now you've achieved your most significant public sales in the mid 6 figures, and is the challenge of how you balance commercial art while staying true to your creative vision. If you can share some thoughts about that tug of war.
Yeah, so I actually had this conversation earlier about commercial work. For me is interesting because like in the fine art world, it's like a lot of times like a faux pas, but I'm like, I also don't believe in the traditional system as it exists. Like, just like the standard gallery. So I think that it's too old system. It's like, you don't need to be all in on just, only doing commercial work or only doing gallery work. I think that there's kind of a lane in between. I think that now more than ever, the artist has the power. If there's attention on you, then you have the power. Like, so you kind of get a little bit more say. So I like to balance between, I definitely did a bunch of brand stuff and partnership stuff early on that I like wasn't proud of at the same time, that like I would look back and be like, I really wish I didn't do that, but it paid me $3,000 and I really needed that at the time. And I hope no one ever finds that on Google, But now I do things and I'm just a little bit more strategic about who I work with, when I work with them, how often I work with them. You don't want to always have like if I'm doing a gallery show, I don't want like 5 like commercial things happening at the same time. So timing everything out for me is a big thing. And honestly, trusting your instinct is the most important. But I will say, like, for me, I trust my circle around me a lot. And I'm someone who's like kind of insecure in the way that, not like insecure, but like I need feedback. So if I'm doing something like, what if I did this? Should I do this? And then they'll be like, I don't know if you should do that or whatever, blah, blah. So like trusting your circle, I think, is a big thing. But sometimes you have a bad circle and you trust the wrong person, but you live and learn. And then that will become a lesson for later on, that you'll get something.
To that point, and to conclude our evening, I think that living and learning is so crucial to your artistic journey. And I just think you'll all agree with me that this evening has been truly so informative about this circuitous journey that our artists, ThankYouX and Josh, have taken. There's something similar in their experiences: incredible tenacity, not letting obstacles get in the way, creative diversions, finding the way, collaborating with others across disciplines, bumping your head and learning along the way.
One thing I want to say to that is like, there's kind of this thing that I learned. So I've, just like Josh, I've worked kind of like every job you can think of. So I worked at Mac Makeup for 3 years at South Coast Plaza. And it was the easiest job I ever had, and it made good money for a mall job. I worked just as a cashier. And one of the things that a coworker of mine said one time was, like the back door for the break room would open, and she would say, "Shut the door. No one wants to see Snow White smoking," like on her smoke break. And like, cause it'd be like someone in the break room and she'd be like, "No one wants to see Snow White on her smoke break." And so I thought, I use that a lot, or I think about that a lot. Like the last slide was like a picture of my solo show at the end of last year at Sotheby's Gallery in Beverly Hills. And, but you just see the picture. You don't see Snow White on her smoke break, like almost running out of gas, trying to go to the art store, like doing this, like all the different little things. And I don't think all of it is necessary. So like going back to like, documenting stuff, like you don't need to necessarily make a TikTok about like going to the art store and like, if it works for you, that's great, but don't feel like you have to because TikTok is the thing or Instagram is the thing. Like, so a lot of my times, if I would have told everything that happened to me on the back end, like I've never talked about that $15,000 thing that happened to me for signing a bad contract publicly. I'm actually not allowed to. So, but I don't care. I became friends with the guy later on. It's a very weird story. He apologized. But no, like they just see the pretty things. And a lot of times they don't need to see like how the meat is made, they just want to see the final product, and that's okay. And then sometimes people want to see more and learn more about you, and that's great. Like the fact that I'm here, like that's a little bit more behind the curtain, than a normal person would get. So you can kind of curate what you show to people and how you want to be seen at the same time.
Right. Well, what's so crucial is that the art that you're creating is connecting with society in a way that resonates with the culture of today. And the insights that you shared with us today are giving us some way to understand what it means to be an artist today. And it's not easy. It's never been easy. But there is tremendous aesthetic and beauty in the work that you and Josh have produced in your own way. And you tended to both sort of play that down, but you are, after all, artists, and we didn't talk as much about the artworks themselves, but the journey that you went through and how that resonated with society. And I think there's a lot to.
I think coming from like I came from like a kind of punk rock background of like, don't talk about yourself like that. Like, so the journey is like okay to talk about, but when it's like something that I made, I'm like, it's just I've made it by myself in my studio. Like, yeah,
should shout that out loud.
I'm not good at that part.
So I do want to thank Rivian Theatre for providing this incredible space for us. And a huge round of applause to ThankYouX and Josh Videos. Thank you so much.